A woman named Linda Markowitz tells her story on how she picked up a man on this side of the road who turned out to be an angel. And what this man said and did was pretty shocking, and the events that led after will make you really question what he was even doing there. Many years ago, Linda's youngest daughter had been in some trouble with the law, and she had been sent to a juvenile detention center in Albany, New York. Now, Linda was in Harrison, New York at the time that this happened, and it was about a 2-hour drive away. She was only allowed to visit her daughter on the weekends for a very short period of time. So she got ready to head out to go to her visit, but all of a sudden, Linda was very quickly overtaken by this huge snowstorm, and it was a blinding one at that. But this didn't stop Linda. She was determined and said that this was not going to stop her from seeing her daughter. As she was driving, she could see that there were cars on the side of the road and they couldn't make it any further. But she was determined. As long as she could move, she was going to keep driving. She was pretty much the only car driving on the road at the time. As she was driving, she saw this figure ahead of her, and the closer she got, she realized that it was a man walking. She drove past him and for some reason just felt this compassion for this man. She thought to herself that she just needed to help this guy. And there was no other cars in sight. So she pulled over, stopped on the side and waited for him, and he finally approached her car and he came up from the back of the car around to the driver's side. The man asked Linda, "What can I do for you, ma'am?" She thought, what can he do for me? I'm not the one out here in the freezing cold. She looked at the man and said, well, I thought maybe you could use a ride. Would you like a ride? He said, oh, I'd be so grateful for a ride. Would you mind? Linda said, come on, get in. And then they went on their way. Now, keep in mind, this was many, many years ago, so you probably wouldn't pick up a hitchhiker today. It wasn't as dangerous back then as it is today. When the man got into the passenger side of her car, he immediately took off his boots and his socks. His feet were really blue, and you could obviously tell that the man was really cold. He didn't even have a decent jacket on. So what was he even doing out in this cold weather walking? Linda described this man looking a little scrappy with long matted blonde hair, but for some reason he had something very inviting about him. As they were talking, the man would end up saying that he was in service and that he just finished up an assignment in Hawaii and that he was in New Jersey and couldn't get any transportation to his next location. Linda asked the man, well, where is your next location? And Linda, a little shocked by what he said, because she thought to herself, well, that's kind of strange. Of course you can get transportation from where you were in New Jersey. He ended up telling her that he had an assignment in Boston, that he needed to get to Boston. So now Linda knows about how much further she could go to take him before she would need to turn to Albany, and he would end up going a different direction to Boston. They continued on this very, very slow journey. And they eventually came up to this rest stop, and she thought to herself she really needed to call the facility where her daughter was at to tell them that she was going to be really late, and she wanted to plead with them to wait for her so that she could see her. The facility, knowing about the snowstorm, said yes, they would still give her this visit when she got there. While she was in the phone booth making the phone call, she finally realized, oh my goodness, she left the car running because the man was still really cold, and she thought that she would leave the heat on for him, and on top of that, she left her purse inside the car, and all of this had flashed through her mind. Again, this was many years ago. As you could tell, she had to use a phone in the phone booth to call out. It's not like they had a cell phone to make calls like we do today. If you need to make a call, you either had to wait till you got home or stop somewhere where you could use a phone booth. So all of this flashed through her mind, and she realized that everything she had was in that car, and if the man wanted to, he could just take off, and there was no way that she was going to be able to stop him. But she thought to herself, hey, what can I do? So she ended up finishing her phone call. When she was done, she walked back to her car, and she got in and glanced at her purse to make sure it wasn't messed with, and it didn't even look like it was touched. They got back on the road and continued their talk. The man told Linda some really fascinating things. He told her that there were things that were going to come into her life that would be very interesting and difficult for her. She thought, this man is saying this and he doesn't even know me. She didn't ask him any questions. She just sat there and drove while he just talked. This man was probably in the car with her for about 45 to 50 minutes until they came to the place in the road where she needed to go one way and the man the other. So she pulled over to the side of the road. She told the man, "This is where I need to let you off." The man said, "Okay, I understand." But before the man got out of the car, he turned to Linda and he said, "I will see you again in a day when you need me the most." Linda, shocked, thought, "Man, this guy is really weird," and she was pretty glad that he was getting out of the car. He stepped out of the car and he immediately disappeared. Linda thought, "Oh no, the snow was blinding and it was building up on the side. Maybe she parked too close to the edge and he just fell down the embankment." Worried, she immediately got out of her car and ran around to the passenger side. And she was so overwhelmed by what she didn't see. She didn't see the man anywhere. And to make things really strange, there was not one footprint, not even where the guy stepped out of the car. She looked everywhere for this man and she didn't see him anywhere. Again, she couldn't see any footprints, only her own. It would have been very obvious that there would be footprints where this guy got out of the car or if he walked in any direction, but there was just no footprints. She just stood there outside in the cold with no one around thinking, what just happened? Then all of a sudden, a very powerful presence of warmth came over her. At the time, she didn't know why or what the purpose of her having this encounter with this angel, but later on, it would become real clear to Linda why this man was going to Boston. But at the time, she had no clue. She got back in her car and just sat there trying to process everything that just transpired with this man, or should I say angel. Thinking and pondering on these things he said, and the last thing that he told her before getting out of the car, which was he would see her again at the time when she needed him the most. Linda ended up seeking the Lord about this, and over time it became real clear to her that God gave her this visitation to show that we entertain angels without even knowing. That angels are all around us, and most of the time we can't even see them. But at that very moment in time, God knew that Linda needed that encounter to help strengthen her faith, to show that God is at work. Okay, now here is a little bit of a twist in this story. And to make this long story short, years in the future, Linda's youngest daughter, the one that she was going to go see at the juvenile center, was brutally murdered by her boyfriend. Linda, in rage, hurt, and shocked with what her daughter's boyfriend did, she had another encounter, a very powerful encounter with God, telling her to forgive her daughter's murderer. It was really hard at first, but in the end, Linda was able to forgive this man that ended her daughter's life. So, was this encounter with this angel in this snowstorm a way to prepare her faith for what was going to happen to her daughter, or was this just something else? Let me know what you think in the comments below. That does it for today's video. Hit that thumbs up. God bless.